Hello everyone in the Ansakari again, and today we are starting a new chapter that is the federal system and particularly the federal features of the Indian Constitution. Because when we say and when we categorize the Indian Constitution, so the basic element of it is the federal feature. Now, what is the meaning of federalism? Where there is an existence of two types of government, that is central government and the state governments. If we compare it with the other constitutions across the geographies in the world, so we see that in some countries they use different nomenclatures for the states. Some states has cantonments, some uses states, some uses subsidiary territories, and so and so. But if we talk about Indian context, so we have the union government, which is known as the central government under Article 1 of Indian Constitution, and the various states which we have under the Constitution, not under the direct control, but share somehow similar powers with the central government. So, what is the feature of federal government, and do we have any alternative of this? So, the answer is yes. We have two types of governments. One is federal, and the second part is unitary form of government. So, in the federal government, we have two types, as we mentioned, national government or the regional government. Some uses union or center name for the national government, and some uses cantonments, states for the regional government. In contrast, where there is an unitary government, there is only one kind of government, that is the central government. Then in federal government, we have a written constitution, because if there will not be a written constitution, so it will become practically typical to identify as to what comprises the tasks and the responsibilities of respective agencies of respective governments. Example, in India, we have central government and state governments. So the powers of respective governments have clearly established in the Constitution when we talk about Article 246, which is prescribing three types of lists, that is the central list, state list, and concurrent list. And not only that, in the seventh schedule of Indian Constitution, also we have the functions which are clearly mentioned within the respective part of different sort of government. But in the unitary government, the written nature of the constitution may or may not be. For an example, if we talk about France, so France is an example of unitary government, but there is a constitution in the written form. But the same country, we have the colonial masters Britain, where there is no written constitution. So can we say that Britain is not a republic? So no, we cannot say that Britain is not republic. The reason being, for republicness, what is required is constitutionalism, constitutional obligations towards law. So in Britain, already they had the constitutionalism, the civicness, the responsible citizenship, and that's why they didn't feel as of a need to have a written form of constitution. But still, we can say that it is a pure form of republic. Apart from that, in federal government, both of the types of the government, that is the center and the state, they are under the constitution, which simply means that they are under the will of the people. People are supreme. But in unitary form of government, it may be different. For an example, if we talk about Japan, so Japan is an example of unitary form of government, and there is constitution supreme as we have in India. But there are other countries like, if we talk about Britain, so the constitution is not supreme there. There the parliament is supreme, because according to Britain's law, the parliament is representing the sovereign will of the people, the collective wisdom of the people, and it can change or alter the constitution on the basis of the rising aspirations accordingly. Then in the federal government, the constitution is generally made sophisticated, generally made rigid. The reason being, if it will be made flexible, then the center government will try to alter the part which it do not like, and respective state governments will also commit the same kind of thing. If we talk about France and Britain, again in the same comparison, both are the part of unitary government. So France has rigid constitution, but if we talk about the Britain, so that is having a flexible constitution because of having undocumented nature. Apart from that, in some countries, in the unitary form of government, some has a bicameral form where two houses exist. One is representing the general population and one is representing the states, like the federal features of India, where we have the bicameralism. But in the unitary, there are number of countries where we do not find the bicameralism. Example, our neighbor, China. And to uphold the federalism, we require a strong, independent, and sovereign judicial setup. And that is, we have the judicial system of India, which starts from Supreme Court till the tribunals at that bottom level, which ensures that the federal features are enshrined, are maintained, and are adhered by the respective agencies which comprise the part of federation. अगर हम इसके अलावा बात करें कि कौन सी ऐसी कंट्रीज हैं जहां पर अलग अलग नाम है, तो स्विट्जरलैंड की अगर बात करें तो इन स्विट्जरलैंड द स्टेट्स आर कैटेगराइज्ड एज कैंटons, but in India we categorize the military areas as cantons, so that is a difference. In Canada we have provinces, like earlier pre-independence times we are also used to call our states as provinces. In Russia, republic they are considered as. Now there is a slight difference when we use the term federalism in the Indian context. How so? When we understand the term federalism, so the federalism mentions a kind of treaty and agreement, which simply means that federalism provides federation, where the states comes in an agreement and provide their powers to a third party, that is a central government, so that if there is any conflict of interest between two state governments, three state governments, or multiple state governments and one state government on one hand, so then the arbitration, the conflict resolution without biasness can be done by the third party, that is the central government. So there is an agreement to deliver the power to that third party, and that is the true nature of federalism. And now what is the feature? The feature of federalism is that the central government is not the powerful as the states are. The central government can be breaked, can be altered, but the states cannot be done so, because states have given the powers to the center to govern them and to provide them a way to governance. But when we talk about Indian federalism, so there is a slight difference, and that is that there is no such kind of agreement has been established. Here, the decentralization work has taken place, where the central government, on the basis of administrative efficiency and to represent the grievances and their ramification at the basic level, it provided the states to have their existence. So in Indian context, it is not an agreement. It is the deemed transfer, which is given by the central government to respective states as an admin unit. So in India, we have the states as administrative unit, whose responsibilities is to do the governance, to sort out the conflicts at the state level, to administer the policies and the programs at the state level, and in case if there is a conflict of interest, then adhere to the guidelines of the central government, which is considered as union in Indian context. And that is mentioned in Article 1, that India, that is Bharat, is a union of states, where the union is irreconcilable, where the union is permanent, but the states are having destructible nature and union is having indestructible nature. So this is a brief sum up about the federalism, number of countries, their comparison with the Indian Federation, what are the different nomenclatures we use in the respective countries, and what are the prerequisites for the federation, what are the prerequisites for the unitary system in different geographies across the world. So now we are heading towards the next thing, and that is this. So these are some features which have been laid out here that what is federalism. तो जहां पर दो से ज्यादा गवर्नमेंट की डिविजन्स हो, सेंटर है, स्टेट है, या फिर कहीं पर तीसरा भी कर दो, जैसे कि अगर बात करें पंचायती राज, but that is not the federal feature. Federal feature simply means where there is power which is distributed between two organs, that is the central government and the state government. Then apart from that अलग अलग इनके jurisdictions बढ़ जाते हैं. Legislation में सेंट्रल लिस्ट में कैसा कानून बनाने की पावर है, स्टेट में कैसी है. टैक्सेशन, बड़े टैक्स के मैटर सेंटर के पास रहते हैं, उसके बाद लिवाई करने का, अप्रोप्रिएट करने का स्टेट के पास रहता है. इसके अलावा अगर हम बात करें तो वी हैव judiciary also, which is in the alignment of the federal feature, where we talk about in Indian context, that is a Supreme Court, which is the central court, we can say, apart from the head of the judicial system in India. And we have the federal courts also, that is the judiciary of state, that is the high courts in each state. Then there are two kind of routes through which federation have been formed, जिसके अंदर हमने अभी भी बात की कि first route involves that independent states come together and form a third party. ये उसी की बात है. तो ऐसा कहाँ पर देखने को मिला? United States of America, Switzerland, Australia. These are the famous countries where the agreement form of federation has taken place. And the second route, we have the example like Belgium, India, Spain, where the center is somewhat more powerful than the states, so as to deal the problem of law and order, the unity and integrity, the sovereignty of the country, the maintenance of the international boundaries, and the international conventions, treaties, memorandums. For an example, the partnership and the membership of Commonwealth Association, the membership of WTO, IMF. And we can also stress that if the very first kind of federation system would have been there in India, then the India would not have been there. The reason being that in all these countries which we are talking and comparing with India, they are having the homogeneous society. They are having similarity in the language, in their customs, in their traditions. There is no diversity, or if there is a diversity, then that is also very minimal. But if we compare with India, so India is known as the homeland of diversity. India is known as the place where each religion you face, each custom you find, each tradition and religion practices you witness. So it is a highly diverse society, which simply means that it is a heterogeneous culture society, where there are a number of languages, where there are a number of bolis, where there are a number of language, food, custom, religion, region, so on and so forth. So if the states would have been given the power to just make an agreement so as to form the central government of the state, then there would have been a conflict of interest. When we talk about interstate boundary disputes, if the center would not have been there, then one state would have controlled the whole water resources and would have prevented the water flow into the riparian states. For an example, Kaveri Pact. For an example, Punjab, Haryana water dispute. For an example, Krishna, Godavari, all these rivers. Then the land boundary disputes between the Maharashtra and Karnataka or the Belgavi region and the other areas, so on and so forth. And Northeast is a prime example in that context. So to prevent the disintegration and fragmentation of Indian society, Indian culture, Indian administration, the constituent makers, and we can say the forefathers of Indian constitution, laid out a strong center plan, which is derived from, we can say, the number of constitutions of the world when we talk about the Australian constitution, Germany, Russia, and so on and so forth. So here is a question: is the term federalism mentioned in the Indian constitution? So I would like to ask from Oshik to please have his view on this question. Do we have the term federalism mentioned in Indian constitution? Yes or no? So I think he's not available. So I would like to suggest that in Indian constitution, there is nowhere the term federation is mentioned. There is only one thing which is mentioned, and that is the union of states, and that is in Article 1. Union of states हमने क्यों लिया? If we ask, why we didn't adopt the federation of states over the union of states? क्यों हमने union को ही preference दी? So number one, the reason that we do not find any kind of agreement as we see in other countries which have federation in their constitution. We have union. And number two, we have the federation where the union is more powerful, permanent, indestructible, and the states are having destructible nature, and that is why it is union. It is the maibap of all the states, not a federation, because we see that when we talk about, we can understand it more easily by taking the examples of various federations. For an example, we have sugar federation over the sugar mills. We have tennis federation over the tennis sport. We have other football federation and so on and so. So in those federations, what actually is the plan is that whatever the laws the federation will make, whatever the conventions the federations will make, that will have to comply the norms and regulations suggested by various states. For an example, if we take the example of Tennis Federation of India. So in Tennis Federation of India, though the powerful institution we are visualizing that it should be the Tennis Federation over the whole tennis sport, but actually the case is somewhat different. How so? That all the members of this Tennis Federation will be 28 states of India and the union territories. हर स्टेट के अंदर टेनिस खेला जाता है, उसका अपना क्लब होगा, वो क्लब जो है रिप्रेजेंट होगा टेनिस फेडरेशन के अंदर. Now the tennis federation responsibility is to accommodate all the laws, all the features, all the policies and plans which every state club is suggesting to them, and then make a law so as the state clubs feels good, feels happy that okay, our demands is met. But the same kind of thing is not in Indian federal setup. Here, the federation is not used because if this would have happened, then if Tamil Nadu and Karnataka fights for a particular reason, and if union feels that on the basis of established facts, on the basis of conscience, on the basis of procedure, the case should go to the Tamil Nadu. But then the Karnataka will not adhere to the decision of the country, to the federation. So to avoid such kind of conflict of interest and anarchy, we adopted the union setup, where whatever union will say, you have to comply. Otherwise, your existence will come in danger. You will be removed from the statehood. You will be converted into the UT. Then I will become your totally Maiba. Currently, I am giving you some sort of functions. Currently, I am assigning you some sort of independence and autonomy. Just enjoy that. But in case you will do any sort of interference, undue, in my responsibility, in my nature, then I do have the right to abolish you. I can deter you, I can change your name, I can change your territory, I can change anything as far as you is concerned as a state under Article 3, which we mentioned, internal readjustment of the states. That is Article 3 of Indian Constitution. So if a second question I raise, so which country we have the same line of federalism? So the answer is Canadian model. In Canadian model, the center is considered as very important, very strong, and not the part of agreement, but the source of resources, the source of power. And we can say that Indian form of federalism or Indian federal system is derived from the Canadian Constitution, where and which establishes a very strong central government setup so as to accommodate the interest of states, but also to supervise them in various functions, that is the administration, law and order, finance, and so on. So then what makes India a federal country? So we have union government, that is the first, state government, that is the second. So this is signifies that we have federal country. How under Article 246, where we have list, under 7th schedule, where we have items of list, which are ensuring that there is a separation of power between both the respective governments, and there is one residuary matter in which the center can take the hold over the whole matter in the exigency situations, in the emergency situations. तो यहाँ पर बात हो रही है कि कौन सी ऐसी लिस्ट है और क्या उनके अंदर बताया गया है. तो वी हैव यूनियन लिस्ट where the important matters are dealt with. For an example, defense of the country, foreign affairs, banking. And we can say that the Banking Regulation Act 1949, which is giving the nodal power to the RBI, the rules and regulations regarding all such kind of things will be made by the union government. Then communication and the currency. All matters are require the uniformity across India. For an example, if the banking would have been in the state list, that would have prevented that banking to function on the structural level. किसी स्टेट के अंदर आपको ज्यादा पैसा मिलता है, किसी स्टेट के अंदर आपको ज्यादा क्रेडिट पे इंटरेस्ट मिलता है, सारा का सारा फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट वहीं जाएगा, सारा का सारा क्रेडिट कल्चर वहां कन्फाइन हो जाएगा, वहीं पर ज्यादा इंडस्ट्रीज आएंगी और जो कंट्री है उसके अंदर इकोनॉमिक इनइक्वालिटी प्रमोट हो जाएगी. So to prevent such kind of nuances, the constituent makers adopted such kind of subjects in these lists with due consideration. State list के अंदर geographical specific, regional specific matters हैं. For an example, police, trade, commerce, agriculture, irrigation. State इनके ऊपर कानून बनाती है. And हमने देखा कि state list जो की दी हुई है, यहाँ पर भी हम बोल सकते हैं कि it is subjected to the law of the central government in case of 4 to 5 situations. Number 1, when there is a president rule. Number 1, when there is a national emergency. Number 3, when the president, when the Rajya Sabha passes a resolution. Number 5, when 2 or more states passes a resolution and suggests parliament to frame a law. And the last thing is when there is an international agreement, convention, treaty, which has to be implemented without even the permission of state governments. So these are 5 areas where the state list is also subject to the control by the central government. And in the concurrence list, where both the governments can make law, but in case there is a law made by the union, so that will be adhered to, and all the state governments have to comply with that. Now, what is the residuary powers? So residuary powers are those powers which are not mentioned in constitution specifically in these 3 lists. So the matter which is outside the purview of these lists, outside the purview of 7th schedule, they are, and those matters are considered as residuary matters. जो timely derived भी हो सकते हैं, जो timely नहीं आ भी सकते हैं as far as the rising society is concerned. तो हम बोल सकते हैं कि इन matters के ऊपर union government has a power, not the parliament. So parliament cannot frame law, because if the parliament is going to frame law, then what is the difference between the union list and the residuary list? It will become the same. So to prevent such kind of ambiguity, the union government is empowered to frame laws on the residuary subject. जहां पर हम देखते हैं कि 2/3 majority. So we can say that every law in each list is made with simple majority. But in case if you want to change the subject from one list, or if you want to shift or transfer a particular subject from one list to the another, then you require the total majority, the special majority, that is a 2/3 majority of the total membership of both the houses, along with ratification of half of the state legislatures, so as to shift that particular subject or number of subjects from A list to B, B to C, and C to A, and vice versa. And this is also subject to the constitutional provisions, where the judicial review is duly available to the High Courts and Supreme Court, so as to prevent the excessiveness of the centralization in country. Now, what is decentralization? When we talk about center and state, so that is a federal setup where the power is distributed duly as far as the constitution is suggesting. So can we say that that is showing a decentralization? So obviously, when the central government is providing power to the states, that is also a form of decentralization. But we saw that during the Prime Minister Narasimha Rao tenure, the constitutionalization was done of the local government via the 73rd and 74th Amendment Act 1992, of which in detail we have talked in a couple of days yesterday before, so we can watch there. So that is also a form of decentralization. Decentralization is not subject to the center, state, and panchayat. Decentralization is a phenomenon where the power, where the resources, where the personas are getting transferred to the local level so as autonomy can come, so as independence can come, so as grassroots development can take place at the remotest level of the country. तो डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन किया क्यों जाता है? पहला, ओवरबर्डन ना हो एक एजेंसी के ऊपर, डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ पावर हो, एमिकेबल सॉल्यूशन निकल सके। दूसरा, टाइमली डिसाइड हो केसेस, ज्यादा लॉजिस्टिक कॉस्ट ना आए, एक्सपर्टीज को मौका मिले ताकि लोकल लेवल पर जो एक्सपर्टीज चाहिए उसके बिहाफ पर आप कंफ्लिक्टिंग इंटरेस्ट को सोसाइटी के अंदर मैनेज कर सकते। When we study about the political science and economics, both are the interdisciplinary. Both are subjects which are having association with each other, intermingled there. So when economy says as a discipline that there is a shortage of resources, there is a scarcity of resources in the society, and to ensure the equilibrium in the society, we have to do the best choices. We have to take the best decision so as to maintain an equilibrium in the society, and the resources distribution should also be on the basis of equity. So what political science says here? Political science says that the individuals cannot do this. We require a supreme party, and that party is a state. That party is a state, that party is a center, that party is a panchayat. So we can say that decentralization happens so as to the conflicting interest to decide the resources allocation takes place efficiently, smoothly, and that is what legitimizes the state's authority. Apart from that, better decision making होती है, local government का representation होने से pressure cooker syndrome nahi hota hai. Now what is it? Pressure cooker syndrome simply is not a nuance. Pressure cooker syndrome is a term which we study in the discipline of center-state relations. Here the meaning is, if the center will suppress the state, if the state will suppress the panchayat, it will lead to a situation like pressure cooker syndrome, और आप जितना ज्यादा प्रेशर डालेंगे प्रेशर कुकर फट जाएगा। इसका मतलब क्या हुआ कि आप सेंट्रलाइजेशन टेंडेंसीज को घटाइए, डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन को डालिए, ताकि जो पीपल्स की एस्पिरेशंस हैं, उनकी ग्रीवियंसेस हैं, उनके जो रिसोर्स एलोकेशन के मुद्दे हैं वो डील हो सके। नाउ द क्वेश्चन इज कि अगर हम डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन नहीं भी करें, अगर हम सेंट्रलाइजेशन ही चाहें, तो सेंट्रलाइजेशन होने से क्या दिक्कत है? दो। तो नंबर फर्स्ट दिक्कत and the number first problem is it leads to inequality in the society, and number two, injustice in the society. जब आप सेंट्रलाइजेशन करते हैं तो रिप्रेजेंटेशन नहीं हो पाता, ऊपर ऊपर जो एलीट लोग हैं, जो टॉप पोजीशन पर बैठते हैं, उन्हीं के इंटरेस्ट फुलफिल होते हैं, नीचे वाले लोगों के मन में भावना क्रिएट होती है इनइक्वालिटी। दूसरी भावना उनके लिए क्रिएट होती है इनजस्टिस की, क्योंकि जब इनइक्वालिटी उनके साथ हो रही है तो उसका रिप्रेजेंटेशन तक नहीं हो पा रहा उनका। कहाँ जाएं? सेंट्रल के पास तो पहुंचने के पास रिसोर्स ही नहीं, कोई पंचायत ही नहीं है, कोई स्टेट गवर्नमेंट ही नहीं है, कहाँ अपना रिप्रेजेंटेशन दें? ग्रीवेंस रिड्रेसल ही नहीं है। तो इनइक्वालिटी ने फ्यूल किया इनजस्टिस को, कि हमारे साथ अन्याय हुआ, और जब इनइक्वालिटी और इनजस्टिस का मिक्सचर बना, सॉल्यूशन बना, तो सॉल्यूशन से ब्लास्ट होता है और उसको बोला जाता है रेवोल्यूशन। ये जो रिवोल्यूशन होता है, ये क्या होता है? ये रिवोल्यूशन होता है मिलिट्री को। एग्जाम्पल, द नेबरिंग कंट्री म्यांमार, एग्जाम्पल द सब सहारन कंट्री सूडान। जब इनइक्वालिटी इनजस्टिस इतनी बढ़ जाती है कि सेंट्रल लेवल पर सारी पावर एग्जिस्ट है, सेंट्रल लेवल पर ही करप्शन इतना हो रहा है, रेड टेपिज्म है, नेपोटिज्म है, नो गवर्नेंस, नो एग्जिस्टेंस ऑफ जस्टिस, नो इनइक्वालिटी, that leads to a revolution in the minds of the people, and that is why it leads to the upheaval of various political forms. जब ये रिवोल्यूशन होता है इन्हीं से तख्ता पलट होता है, जब ये रिवोल्यूशन होते हैं इन्हीं से मिलिट्री कॉप का जन्म होता है, जब ये तख्ता पलट होते हैं इन्हीं से नई नई पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज का राइज होता है। और हम बोल सकते हैं कि दिस इज अ फिनोमिनन। तो इसको प्रिवेंट करने के लिए ये दो लोगों के लिए अच्छा है, आम आदमी के लिए अच्छा है कि वो रिवोल्यूशन नहीं करे, और स्टेट के लिए भी अच्छा है कि अगर आप अपनी सहमति चाहते हैं, आप अपनी एग्जिस्टेंस चाहते हैं, so you do the decentralization. So this is a brief sum up as far as what is decentralization, what are the reasons because of decentralization, and what are the necessity so as to we require the decentralization process to take place in the political context. So I hope we are understanding whatever we are speaking of. So major step was taken during 1992. हमने बात की काफी चर्चा में कि पंचायत आई, म्यूनिसिपैलिटीज आई, लोकल सेल्फ गवर्नमेंट आई, इनका भी इलेक्शन हुआ, शेड्यूल्ड ट्राइब्स, ओबीसीज, वुमेन को रिप्रेजेंटेशन मिला ग्रास रूट लेवल पर, पोलराइजेशन ऑफ सोसाइटी हुआ। पोलराइजेशन ऑफ सोसाइटी का मतलब क्या है कि लोगों के अंदर पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम के अंदर पार्टिसिपेट करने की इच्छा बढ़ी, पोलराइजेशन ऑफ वोट हुआ अलग अलग मुद्दों के ऊपर। So now we are studying about the relations between the center and state as an Indian federal setup in detail, where we are starting from part 11 of Indian Constitution. But before we begin, I would like to identify as to what are the federal features of Indian Constitution in brief. So number one, we have the dual polity structure, where we have the central government and the state government. This is number one feature. Number two, written constitution. Indian Constitution, 415 plus articles, 12 schedules, more than 25 parts, dealing with both the things, procedural aspect, substantive aspect. Number third, division of power. List की हमने बात की, article 246, 7 schedule की. Supremacy of constitution, where the center will also subject to the provision of the constitution and the state will also do the same thing, the panchayat will also do the same thing. But how they will ensure the supremacy when they will adhere to the laws framed by the court, by the Supreme Court. And that is why we are again and again reiterating that whenever there is a conflict of interest between the parliamentary law and a high court verdict or a Supreme Court law or a Supreme Court verdict, so the primacy will have to be given to the judicial law, because they have the responsibility to adjudicate as to what will constitute constitution and what is constitution saying, what constitution meant, what constitution provides you as a power. Apart from that, what is the federal feature of Indian Constitution? It is rigid. Article 368 is used to alter the constitution for the addition and the subtraction part. Then the independence of judiciary, which is mentioned in the constitution itself, where we have the full setup of court, and the independence is enshrined of the judges, where they will have to act as far as the constitutional mandate is given to them, without ill will, without fear of favor. Apart from that, the last thing is bicameralism, where exists two houses. One is the Lok Sabha and one is Rajya Sabha. Lok Sabha symbolizes the collective wisdom. Lok Sabha symbolizes the people's will. Lok Sabha symbolizes the rising aspirations of the society. As far as the Rajya Sabha is concerned, it is a scrutiny house, it is a check and balance house, it is a senior most house, it is a house which ensures that on the basis of the expertise, on the basis of seniority, we understand, we incorporate, we help the Lok Sabha in framing a law which do not function as far as the people's will is concerned, but also as far as the constitutional mandate. So Lok Sabha says what people wants, but Rajya Sabha says what people wants, but what constitution also wants. So Rajya Sabha provides a mixture of law that is taking the will of the people and taking the will of the constitution and then frame the collective law. So that is why we require Rajya Sabha so as to put a check and balance on the law-making power of the Lok Sabha. So this is the federal features. But if we talk about in 2.5 minutes, what are the unitary features? So we have strong center, no need to explain, we can understand. Then Article 1 describing union of state, where the state is having destructible nature and the union is having different, that is indestructible. Single constitution, if we talk about US, they have different constitutions for the states also, but that is absence in the Indian context. We have only one. And if you're not adhering, you will be subject to uh, abolition of your existence under Article 355 also. Then flexibility of the Constitution. It is rigid on one hand, flexible on the other, where the majority of part can be amended. Obviously, we have the rigid process to do so. Then no equality in the state representation. That simply means that the representation is based on the population in India. It is not based on the statehood. If the Goa, the constituency is two, only two MP will go. If the UP is having 80 constituencies, 80 MP will go. So no representation uniformity, but yes, we have the uniformity as far as the constituency representation is concerned. Then emergency provisions, article we have 356, 355, 365, 352, 360. Single citizenship, like Canada, as we mentioned, we have a separate single citizenship. Integrated judiciary, we have number of terms. All India services under Article 312, IAS, IPS, Indian Forest Service, not the foreign service, because foreign service is a part of central cadre. Then independent audit machinery under the CAG, which can do audit of any agency, subject to the mandate and the approval given by the President of India. Then the Parliament's authority over the state in 5 matters we just mentioned. Appointment of governor done by the President. So governor acts as a constitutional agent and the head of the state on who works on the mandate given by the President. Election machinery, Election Commission of India, and veto over the state board. So this is how we have concluded what is the basic of the federalism. We will continue from tomorrow. So thank you so much.